Stay tuned. Coming up on this episode, I interview South King County Fire and Rescue Captain Alex.Charoni, where we discuss his passion for determining the root cause of near-miss events and the approach his department is taking to improve firefighter safety. But first, let's pay the bills. Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com. Hello and welcome to episode 280 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this program is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SAMatters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota, having just returned from conducting training programs for the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, the North Metro Fire District in Broomfield, Colorado, and the Evans Fire District in Fort Lupton, Colorado. Today's feature segment is brought to you by SimjuShare. SimjuShare is a simple and affordable way to help you develop and practice situational awareness skills. You can quickly build sims from your photos and simulate almost any kind of incident, including active threat scenarios. And the new SimjuShare Command Training Center now lets you conduct multi-company drills over the internet, so you can even run drills while your companies stay in station. Check them out at SimjuShare.com. All right, let's jump into today's feature segment, my interview with South King County Fire and Rescue Captain Alex.Charoni, discussing his passion for determining the root cause of near-miss events and the approach his department is taking to improve firefighter safety. Hey everyone, Rich Gassaway here. I'm super excited to have Alex.Charoni with me from South King Fire and Rescue. Alex and I met at the Washington Fire Training Officers Association conference. He was attending the Situational Awareness program, and during the class, engaged in a conversation about his passion for root cause analysis and near-miss reporting. And then on break, we got to talking a little bit more, and what I found out is that he has really done a lot of preparation and policy development and really immersed himself in the why bad things happen, and then how do we assess them and how do we learn from them. And I was so inspired by the things that he was saying. I said, hey, would you do a podcast? And he was like, yeah, sure. So here we are, Alex. Thanks for joining me.
Nice to be with you, Chief.
Let's start off by having you give a little bit of your backstory of when you got started and how long you've been in the business and things like that.
So we'll start off by telling you that I became interested in firefighting all the way back in high school. Did some volunteering and some training, and ultimately did aircraft firefighting in the Marine Corps Reserve, and then volunteered and tried to get on. And in 1990, I was hired by then the Federal Way Fire Department, which is a county fire district. I've been there 29 years now, and currently serving as a training and safety officer for South King Fire, which is actually the Federal Way Fire Department merged with King County Fire District 26 in Des Moines, Washington, and created South King Fire and Rescue. And until July 1st, I'll be a training and safety officer. And then July 1st, I'll be a training officer at the South King County Fire Training Consortium, where we'll be training over 1,300 firefighters, everybody south of Seattle and Bellevue, all the way to the Pierce County line.
I know we talked before we started recording, and you were telling me a little bit about what that transition is and how that all came about. But for the folks on the show, what's going on out there? They're consolidating training centers or training procedures regionally, or what's the motive behind what's happening there?
It's really the brainchild of what was the Kent Fire Department, which is now the Puget Sound Regional Fire Authority. And a number of years ago, they created a training consortium and started operating on this premise that training drives operations. And the more we work together and the more we change our response cards to operate as one department, the more we need to have the same training and operate on the same wavelength, if you will. And so they kind of spearheaded it, and it was such a good idea, other departments started joining, and our department is actually the last department to join. Not because we're late adopters, but I think more because we had one of the more robust training divisions in South King County. And so we're not really late, we're right on time at being last, and it's still growing, and it may grow into the north end of King County and even beyond. So it's a really great concept. And when you talk about safety, having everybody playing off the same sheet of music is one way to improve safety. Oh, for sure.
For sure. Now, you said training, I think you said 1,300 plus firefighters. Is this out of one training center, or is there multiple training centers? What's the physical layout of that?
The consortium actually has a large office and classroom building that's down in the Kent Valley, kind of centrally located, really. And that's where the administration and the training officers work out of. And there are some classrooms and meeting rooms. However, we have three, we call them assets. And my old fire station or training station will become an asset of the consortium on July 1st. And that has a training tower and a Class A burn prop and a classroom. We also have Puget Sound Fire has just an outstanding training center up on the East Hill of Kent with a training tower, multiple story, and they have a natural gas burn prop. And then the Renton Regional Fire Authority also has a training station with a multi-story training tower. So it's really an embarrassment of riches. We have better training facilities than Seattle Fire at this point, so we're lucky.
Yeah. Do you have a budget that supports that as well?
We do. It's kind of complicated. There's some form of formula that they use, and it's based on the number of people you have to train. It's also based on if you send a training officer to them, that offsets the cost. And so we're sending them 3 training officers, and I still think there's, about $50,000 or $60,000 of budget that we have to provide to them. And then we're also covering some of the costs, training officer vehicles, fuel, some of the computer assets and things like that.
Sure. Okay. Interesting. I'm glad we took a moment to pause and kind of have a discussion on that. Swinging around to the real reason that we got together was your passion for firefighter safety, accident investigation, root cause analysis, near miss reporting. Let's go back in time when this all started for you, and what did that look like then, and what has it become up to the current day, and some of the things that you're doing that we talked about at class?
Well, I was interested. I got on the safety committee in the early 90s as a firefighter, and kind of a way to get back and to learn more. And I quickly found out that we read these accident reports, no names attached, just what happened. And then people would vote whether this incident or accident was preventable or non-preventable. And then that was usually the end of it. And I thought, well, that's kind of not very useful information. We're not learning and growing. We're not necessarily following up in any way, although we did at times, of course, when something was clearly was going wrong and we needed to fix it.
Alex, about what time frame in history are we talking? Around what year we at that point in the timeline?
Probably 93, 94.
Okay, early.
A long time ago.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
And I did that for 6 years, and I tried to move it past that with no basis for doing it. I kept questioning why we were investing our time just to decide preventable or not preventable. Zoom ahead a few years, and I had my moment that kind of galvanized me into this. And I was on the tech rescue team at the time, and I was training on doing a pickoff of a victim. And in hanging off the side of this building, I reached out to grab this victim, who was another firefighter, and strained my rotator cuff and ended up in physical therapy and all this. And I got a notice mailed to my house saying the safety committee determined my accident was preventable. And I said, well, how is it preventable? And they said, well, you shouldn't reach out like that in that manner. You did something wrong. And I said, what did I do wrong? And they couldn't tell me what I did wrong. And they said, you should go with your training. And I said, well, I was in the training. How are you supposed to avoid being injured if you don't know everything you need to know yet? And it kind of stopped there, but I couldn't get it out of my head. And I've heard others complain about preventable versus non-preventable. And so zoom ahead, I'm in the executive fire officer program, and I decided to examine our safety committee operations based on that occurrence, and just dove in and started actually trying to become educated in how this stuff works and how it should work.
About what year is this that you're in the EFO?
And this was probably about 2013.
Oh, so more than 10 years after this event occurred.
I don't forget easily, so.
All right, go ahead.
So to zoom ahead here and put it all together, I did the paper. At that time, I wasn't able to do much with it. I was a shift station captain on shift, and nothing really happened until I went into training division. And I was talking with my assistant chief of training about things I had done in the EFO program, because he's in the EFO program. And he asked, how come we haven't implemented any changes because of that? And I said, well, it hasn't worked out yet, and I've been on shift. And he said, well, now you're a training and safety officer, so I'm going to assign you to implement whatever it is that you came up with in your applied research project. And gave me carte blanche and the time to do it. And so then I got kind of that shot of adrenaline, and it was time to just jump in. And that's how we got to the beginning of where we are now.
Now, what was the title of your EFO paper? You can paraphrase it. You don't have to quote it to me.
It's called Evaluating Safety Committee Operations at South King Fire and Rescue. And if your viewers and listeners want to look it up, it's not published, so you'll have to get a hold of me on that one. I have 2 other ones that are published, but this one was not published.
Well, if you want to share it, and I'm not going to, put the pressure on you, but if you share it with me, I'll link it in the show notes. And if you just want them to contact you on an as-need basis, we can do it that way. Either way, especially what inspires me most about that is that EFO paper seems to now be the foundation of the things that you're about to tell me that you started doing. That's what kind of lit it up for you.
Correct.
Yeah. So what came out of the EFO paper, and then what roads did you travel down as a result of that once you got the carte blanche to run with this?
One of the things I do in my research, and I did it in particular, I kind of started over again with the research once I received the go order. And there's a lot of good resources on the IAFC website. We talked in your class about NIOSH reports and all that. I looked at a little bit of that. Firefighterclosecalls.com. And of course, and not that this is a commercial for EFO, but I have some great classmates, and I just threw some things out there, and policies and ideas came back to me. And so I took all those things and kind of put them together. And one of the interesting things about my paper is my brother is a project executive in commercial construction, and has built a lot of things, has won a lot of safety awards. And so I kind of used him. I brought construction into the research because think about what we do in the fire service. We do training and prep, but our time on scene doing things is very small. My brother's crews, their time on scene working is 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week. So the data set is just gigantic in comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And I also found that they have the best developed safety policies, and overall, we could learn a lot from the construction industry. So that was kind of the little, I wouldn't say fly in the ointment, but that was the pearl or the diamond that I found when I got everything else out of the way.
Now, I might be getting the cart ahead of the horse here, but I have to ask, when you made the nexus between construction and the fire service, along the way, was there anyone that said to you, anybody in the fire service say, well, we're not the construction industry, we're really different from construction, so the things they do in construction really doesn't apply to us in the fire service? Did you get anybody failing to see that how it can connect up?
Not the safety committee, but the firefighters, the rank and file, yes. Some of them came from the construction industry to be firefighters. And so they're really experts. They're cross-trained experts because they know both sides better than I do.
Uh-huh.
But you would find that I don't think people might make a quip about that, but if you really drill down, they understand that there's a lot of similarities. There's even time compressed things that have to go on. Things like my brother talking about having 55 concrete trucks lined up ready to dump their loads, into these giant forms. Well, there's so many things that have to be ready and have to go right. Safety can be thrown by the wayside, and there's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in motion there. And so they have the same stress as we have. They're just generally not life and death. They're dollars and cents and timelines and code items and things like that.
Well, I would guess that along the way there might be times when workers or supervisors in the construction on the job site might feel compelled because of urgency or deadlines or peer pressure or supervisor pressure to shortcut best practices, which then might lead to some near miss or injury events, even though the dollars and cents is a lot. That's what drives for-profit companies, but there'd also be a risk there for employee safety too if they kind of get off focus to other priorities besides safety. Is that fair?
It's very fair. And they have the luxury, though, of having the pre-event safety briefings that we normally don't. If you talk about emergency management and operational periods, that's one thing. But on initial response, we don't pull up in front of an apartment fire and get everybody from the first alarm together and get in a circle and talk about what we're about to do.
Right, right. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, there's no time for that. All right. So, um, what came out of the EFO research that you were then able to apply to work, and what were some of the things that you looked at and some of the outcomes? I know you had talked about making up some draft policies, and so talk us through from, say, the EFO paper in 2013-ish up to modern day.
Well, I had, as a part of that paper, I went through all the legal requirements. I read through all the NFPA stuff, the Washington Administrative Code, things like that. And I found it's kind of a lettuce sandwich. There was very little meat in there. It says, you need to have a committee and you need to keep minutes of your meetings and things like that. But it didn't really say, there's nothing in there that will point you towards finding out what's causing things, to having and I know you have to have written plans for risk reduction and stuff, but they're so vague and there's not a lot of detail in them. So it's really up to you. And that's one thing that I recommended for the department. It's up to us to decide how detailed this is going to be and how robust it's going to be. We long ago checked the box. We long ago wrote a safety policy manual, and it was pretty good when it was written, but then, those things fall out of date. And so that brings me to the number one thing. And I actually backed up to the beginning, and I called this paper a study of safety as a process, safety in motion. Because if it's not in motion, you're not doing it right. And I noticed that every time there's any motion at all, whether you're trying to improve one tiny little aspect of your department, or whether you're rewriting the whole manual, or whether you're providing new training to all your recruits, or just writing a new policy about one particular thing, you have to keep the wheels turning at all times. And as soon as they stop, safety is reduced, really.
Exactly. Now, you said that when you look to, the standards that were there, a lot of lettuce and but not a lot of meat, and it kind of said, it's kind of up to you. I would guess there are other organizations out there that have gone and looked at that and saw that it said basically it's up to you, but then they've done nothing because they didn't know where to start, and they didn't know, how to launch a process like this. So what advice would you give to them that would maybe help nudge them in the direction of getting started, or even advancing from where they're at to where they need to be?
I think the first thing is to make sure that you're checking all the legal boxes. So make sure if your state says that you need to have A, B, and C, make sure you have that, and that's up to date as a jumping off point. Obviously, those are not subject to our own discretion, that we decide we just don't want to follow the law. So we start with that. I think, especially with me, with this process, I look to some of our peer organizations, which is kind of the foundation of applied research used by the National Fire Academy. They also tell you to look in other industries, which is why I use my brother as a resource. And so I think to start with, you make sure your policies are up to date. You look at what your neighbors are doing, the people that you respond with at 3 a.m. If they have anything good, incorporate all of it, or as much of it as your organization can. I worked with Puget Sound Regional Fire Authority, who we respond on more calls with them than with anyone else. And I found them to have a pretty good baseline for the fire service view of that. And so I was able to incorporate some of their things, and their root cause analysis was really simple. They just keep asking why until they just get to a dead end. And I found it interesting that they could have something so simple that's so effective. You don't need a lot of training to keep asking why until you get to the end.
That's good advice. Somebody a while back had told me the same thing, and I just want to add one little component to that, and that is sometimes when you're going down this, why, or why do you think that happened, or why do you think this didn't happen, that somebody might say, they might simply say, I don't know. I don't know. And to not let it end there, to continue that and say, well, if you had to speculate 2 or 3 possible things, even if you have to get to where you're not really sure, but you're kind of putting a guess to it, what do you think maybe was the reason? And, a lot of times after you kind of like peel back the layers of the onion, eventually the person goes from, I don't know, to I guess I knew, but I just didn't know how to say it. And once they stumble it out, then they've said it, and they're like, yes, that's that, so don't just let them stop with, I don't know. I think of like one of my kids, why did you do that? I don't know. Yes, you do know. I'll give you some time to think about it, but we're gonna stay with this, because it's very easy to say, I don't know. Okay. And call it good. So that inquisitiveness, it's not an interrogation. I mean, we're not trying to, pin something on someone. We're trying to understand root cause. And a lot of times people don't know how to say what they're thinking. So they say, I don't know. So go ahead.
You're making a great point, Chief, because when I took that role of accident investigator, the first thing was just shock and surprise, because nobody had ever asked people who filled out accident reports anything really. Maybe a phone call to ask, I can't read the incident number. Can you clarify that? Mm-hmm. And I walked in and said, I'm here to investigate your accident. And the first firefighter, he looked like he'd just seen a ghost. And then he couldn't believe that anybody wanted to talk to him about it. And that's what I found is, as far as the actual interviewing goes, is the people that were filling these reports out, after they realized what was going on and understood, because there is some defensiveness at first. Are you here to smack me with a rolled up newspaper? And I said, no, I want to find out what happened. I want to dig down and fully understand it. And I have never seen so much gratitude. These firefighters want to talk about this stuff. And the second part of listening, or second part of the process, is the listening. And that is, you ask them the question, you get them started, and then just be silent and listen. And as you said, why did you do that? Or how did you do that? I don't know. And that silence, they're going to want to fill that silence with more information, and or tell them you don't understand, or, help me understand more about this. And they'll keep talking. Yeah. And I couldn't believe some of the little tidbits. And keep in mind, we're not investigating. We've had some terrible and even one very tragic accident in our history, which also I'm mindful of when I try to develop these programs, because it ended someone's career. But those aren't investigated by a training and safety captain at the beanery table, with a cup of coffee. Those are investigated by labor and industries, and lots of chiefs and investigators that go way beyond that. We're trying to get down to the bottom, so that these things that happen 300 times before a major occurrence, we're trying to eliminate that. So I guess that would keep labor and industries out of our fire stations, because we wouldn't have anything big enough for them to come investigate. And that's the ultimate goal.
It is. Truly it is. Now I want to pause and add 2 contributions to what you have just said there. And one of them is to actually meet and interview someone who's had an event. I had a company that their safety investigation procedure was to have the employee write up what happened. And then, or for, 4 or 5 employees involved, have all 4 or 5 of them write up what happened. And I asked them, when I saw these reports, all like 1-page or half-page reports, I said, I want to see the reports from the interviews. And they're like, oh, we don't interview them. And I'm like, well, how do you think everything you need to know is written on that half sheet of paper about what happened? So what I told the safety person, I said, here's what I want you to do. The next time, I want you to interview them, and if they'll let you, I want you to record it. And then I want you to have it transcribed. And then I want you to see how much data you get compared to that half sheet of paper that was written. Well, some time went by, and he contacted me, and he said, I did it. I interviewed somebody, and they let me record it, and I had it transcribed. I said, how many pages? He said, 56 pages. 56 pages of transcribed conversation. Did you learn anything different than that half-page piece of paper that they filled out? He's like, it was amazing. And between you and I, Alex, we're like, hello, this is the low-hanging fruit. Talk to somebody, and they're going to tell you more, especially if they're not a good writer. If they don't have good sentence structure and they're not a good speller, they're going to try to write up just about the least amount that they can to satisfy the requirements of having submitted a report. And the second thing I want to contribute, then I'll let you add to that, either of these comments, is you said to ask them the question and to be quiet and let them contemplate and think of their answer. So for anyone out there who's going to be doing these interviews, that silence creates discomfort, which will then cause them to want to speak. But it could also want to cause the interviewer to speak. So the caution to the interviewer is when you ask the question and you're silent and they're silent, don't offer them a choice of answers. In other words, you ask them why, and they say, I don't know, and they sit there quietly, and you say, well, was it this or was it this? Because now the interviewer is being suggestive to the dialogue instead of being truly the listener. And I wanted to capture it because you said, you got to be a really good listener, and to be that really good listener, you have to be that person who isn't suggesting the answers to them. So I'll let you speak to that.
And that's really, there's a wide range of people you can interview. Probably the most senior person I interviewed was a 33-year captain, and the most junior were 2 recruits that were still in the academy. And of course, when I went to talk to them, they come running up at attention and they yell, they're reporting as they're ordered to report. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to get anything out of this person, but yes, sir, no, sir, I should have done better, sir, So I just took them away from their class, and I said, come with me. And I took them away from the class around the corner, and we went up to a picnic table, and I said, have a seat. And I tried to change the whole context of that communication. If I would have been thinking about it, I would have worn a T-shirt instead of my uniform, just to try to eliminate those stresses and those things.
Right.
I found that I did 1 or 2 of these by telephone, and it's not the same. You have to go sit with the person or walk with them, or however you do it, because they're going to say something or give you a look, or something's going to happen that you're not going to get on the phone. And also it projects the fact that I really care about this. I'm not just coming here because the chief said go fill out this form. I'm here because I care what happened.
Yeah, solid advice, that doing it in person versus like a phone interview. And some organizations that might be so big, it might be difficult to get schedules aligned to do it in person. But if you can, absolutely, that's the way to do it is. And I think you spoke well to trying to reduce the intimidation factor when you're interviewing someone. You don't really want them guarded. You want them to understand that you're there to learn to have the organization be made better. You're not there to learn so you can, aha, I got you, now you're in trouble kind of thing. This is all for the sake of learning and organizational improvement. And I would assume that on the front end, you got to load some of that into the minds of people, because they probably think that this is kind of like a formal investigation that could result in significant consequences. Yes?
Yeah, we're not consequence focused on that level. And even the form, which is basically I don't know when you want to get into the form that we fill out, but it's basically a Haddon matrix. I have to tiptoe around some parts, because there's a part on it for supervision, which is the same way of saying, so recruit so-and-so, is your lieutenant an idiot? You don't want to go there. So you have to talk about supervision, and say that I'm not here to get anyone in trouble, and nobody's perfect. And on the fire ground in particular, your lieutenant might have been looking at these downed electrical wires instead of, where your foot placement was. Those are all valid, and you can only do so much. So but we have to be careful about that, but we also want to dig into it. You're never going to dig into it if you're there to gotcha anybody. And you have to build that relationship, which takes time and it takes effort. But there's cultural questions as well.
But you want to go through some of the things on the form? Did you design the form, or did you acquire it, or how did that come about?
I kind of acquired it from the Haddon matrix, and then in some of the other things that I queried. I think we talked about this during the class, that there's different root cause analysis templates or formats, and some of them are so detailed that the fire service, if you had to use that, it would never get done, because people would just throw their hands up. And that's one from the airline industry. It is so detailed, and it's very difficult to follow. Now, my advice would be, all of these have their place. The one from the airline industry, there's one from the healthcare industry. There is the Haddon matrix, which we decided to go with. And there's also just the simple fishbone diagram, cause and effect. You might use, and I picked the Haddon because it's the quickest and easiest, I think, for most of what you're doing. However, you can stack these on top of each other as you need them. You could use a Haddon matrix and take one part of that matrix out and do a cause and effect diagram, get down even deeper. And then these healthcare ones and the ones that are from business and manufacturing, those could be interesting as well, but in context. You don't want to be stuck talking about the same little part of the same little accident every single time. You want to cover things. So sometimes you find that you need to go into this other tool and dig a little bit deeper. And we haven't had one of those yet, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. What if you can share some of the questions that you might ask someone, other than why 5 times. What are some of the things that you might ask that would try to unpackage the details? And I know it might be different case by case, but are there some general things that you're asking about training or culture or supervision or tools and equipment, or is there anything that's kind of like the baseline type of questions that you ask to somebody?
I usually start off by showing them their report. And you said a few minutes ago, you were talking about, rather than having them write, you should go talk to them. And I was laughing because our form is designed that the more you type, the smaller the font gets in that section. So I'll hold up a report that's printed and you need a magnifying glass to read it, because it's a defined border for your narrative portion. And if it's tiny, tiny writing, I know that they really had something to say and that they wanted to say something.
Nice. So they fill these out online?
Yes, they can fill them out online.
Okay.
And just email them. So I hold that up and I say, well, it says here you were on this apartment fire, and I get out my magnifying glass and I can see that you were operating in the backyard and the ground was uneven, and it put a lot of stress on your body, wearing all your gear and everything. And then in this particular case, there was a partial tear of the Achilles tendon, which I don't wish on anybody, by the way. Terrible injury. So I just we agree on the basic facts of it, and then I show them the form and actually let them see it. And it's broken down to 3 phases time-wise. There's the pre-event, there's the event, and then there's post-event. That can be important because there's things that were pre-existing, and you have to be careful how you ask about that stuff, because obviously labor and industries doesn't cover an on-the-job injury if you were injured before you came to work. But we're on guard against that because people don't generally come to work injured. They might come to work with something nagging them, or, my earlobe was kind of hurting, that type of thing. But it's important to what we do, but we also don't want to interfere with their care and their return to work and all that, if that makes sense.
Sure it does.
We're not trying to collect evidence that harms that return to work and everything. And there really is nothing there. We just don't want to open the door.
Yeah. Now, not every state would have, or they might have the equivalent of labor and industry, but they may not call it that. Do they then have access to your investigation report and the report that the employee files? Does this become part of what the state would then look at in making their determinations, or is this just completely internal and they don't get to see it?
It's internal. I'm sure they could rightfully look at it if they wanted to, but it's designed to be internal. And if we had something, I think it's kind of a matter of policy the more I think of it. And I would probably let the chief speak to that once these proposed policies, as we were talking about before we started recording, once the proposed policies get to him, that's kind of a risk management, risk transfer sort of a equation, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there any mechanism in place or planned that the lessons that would come out of these near-miss events or the root cause analysis, that might then drive a change in training or a change in policy or a change in equipment? Is there a data capturing mechanism, and then is there a way of reviewing for trends that might lead to an organizational change, or is it too soon for any of that?
It's too soon, but that's the goal. You're exactly on track. That's the goal. And these things that I've investigated so far, they're the painful dings of doing business, some would say. But they cost us money, they cost time, they reduce the effectiveness of the crew maybe for the remainder of an incident. They have implications, and especially since taking your class, I have that little clicker in my hand every time I see something, and I'm thinking, oh boy, I hope we don't get to 300 on this one. Then something bad's going to happen. And It's amazing that, many years ago, I was at a fire, and we had a battalion chief at the time who had a history of some back challenges, and he stepped off a curb, and he stepped down. How high is a curb? 10 inches, something like that. And something in the way that his body reacted to stepping off that curve was so bizarre that with his history and everything, I looked at my partner and I said, I think we just witnessed the end of a career. And you know what? I was right. He never came back.
Wow.
And you'd think it's silly, a guy stepping off a curb. Well, this is where you get into pre-event. The guy had an extensive history of back issues. And you wouldn't think of stepping off a curb as ending a career, but it sure ended his. So that's why we want to look at the whole thing, and it goes way beyond just asking a couple of questions. And it's hard to do, I'll be honest with you, to really try to back up enough and change the size of your net and try to get what you're trying to get. It takes experience, and of course, I'm still learning, and hopefully, you never know, maybe some of this will end up being taken up by the consortium, and we'll be doing it for 1,300 firefighters instead of 150. So
yeah, that'd be amazing. The database you'll generate from that. Do you right now if somebody has a near miss event, is filling out that form and reporting it, is it voluntary compliance or is it mandatory?
Right now it is, let me see. Well, it's technically voluntary, but it's very highly suggested. And, I'll tell you that our organization is really becoming awakened. And I don't know if I can take any of the credit for this because it's much bigger than me. But I was working on my root cause analysis and investigating. And at the same time, we had some near misses, and people started setting off alarm bells saying, we need to investigate this. And one of them that happened recently was an engine company on scene of a medical call, and somebody quite a ways away was discharging a firearm. And if I remember correctly, they hit the engine with one round. And not only did that not initially get reported, the battalion chief wasn't notified immediately. And so two things came out of that. Well, gosh, that was a near miss. And number two, the battalion chiefs are going, hey, we kind of like to know when somebody gets shot at and be able to have that information immediately. And then that grew to, there are some things that we must be told immediately. And so in my policy, it talks about that you do have a responsibility to report, and all near misses shall be reported. The caveat is we're not going to do unless you're willfully violating some very obvious policy or procedure that's just really beyond the pale. It's not a disciplinary situation. As a matter of fact, you're immune from any disciplinary action. And that's right from the IAFC's model policy, basically. And so, getting people to talk about it is more important, unless something heinous or criminal has happened. Getting people to agree that we need to know about all these things is really most important. And if this policy is adopted, the battalion chief will have to be notified when it happens immediately. The chief of safety will also need to be notified within 24 hours. And that way, if there's anything he wants, he can start assembling his resources and applying them to the situation.
Is there, in the mechanism of all this, is there a committee that would, whether they're fully in place yet or not, maybe it's the ambition for, is there a committee that will review these events to try to extract recommendations that would then, go on up to administration? Or is this just something that gets reviewed by like the safety officer? Where does it go after the report's complete. Now, who gets to make a decision if we're going to do something about this?
the safety committee we have is really robust, and they're very passionate about safety stuff. That's how they get on the committee. And in our policy, we can have them look into things further, but we can also bring in other people, experts. We can convene special meetings to really dig deeper into things. One of the things that, and I'm sure every department does this, you don't want to have one process where things are done the same every time. Some things are a lot more serious, and I think we can improve how we do it overall. But the basis, I think, is pretty solid. Where sometimes the chiefs, the administration, take something that's really more significant, like this incident and quite a few years ago, where we had a guy hit by a car on the freeway and almost died and ended his career. Obviously, labor and industries is there, and other things are there. Obviously, it's not a good place for the safety committee to be doing a lot of extra things. Potentially after the fact, you can do that. And we had some, and it was done by the chiefs, exhaustive review and contemplation, and a lot of policies changed. And subsequently, across our whole South County area, we have much stronger policies to protect people from that. But that was one of the incidents that really brought it home. It wasn't LA County, it was our department and our guy.
Yeah. Nothing hits home like that. Alex, what would you want to contribute to the conversation of the root cause analysis, near miss, and all the passion that you have on this? What would you want to contribute that you haven't had the chance to say yet, because I just haven't asked you the right question?
Well, I guess I would go back to that safety is not a stationary topic. It's got to be in motion, and you have to communicate about it all the time. As a company officer, when you're going to a call, talk about things that might jump up and hurt you. When you're coming back from a call, when you're doing drills, talk about safety on your way to the drill location. Just talk about it all the time, and embed it, just like the blue card guys talk about embedding safety at the local level. Don't have a safety officer who's running around this giant warehouse. Embed safety at every turn, at every division, and get it up close and personal. That's really what we have to do. I kind of only went over half this matrix. Probably explain the other half of it really quick. We have the pre-event, the event, and the post-event. But the things we're talking about are just four simple areas. It's personal factors, which is supervision, training, your medical and physical condition, and my favorite one, active and latent errors. And that is, let's say somebody puts a piece of equipment that has a buckle that holds it on the apparatus. They put it on the apparatus, they don't tighten the buckle. Somebody else comes along, opens the compartment door, the equipment falls out and lands on their foot and breaks it. That's a latent error. Somebody else left that little present for the next person to come along and find. Mm-hmm. We talk about equipment, whether it was there, maintained, was it appropriate for the job? Was it used the way it's supposed to be used? Or did you find a new and special way to use that chainsaw that could cause problems? Physical environment, which frequently isn't much of an issue. Weather, visibility, access and egress, control zones, security hazards, things like that. And then social, cultural, and economic. I'm not sure how economic got in there, but that could mean as simple as I came to work with an injury because I didn't want to burn a shift of sick leave. So that could be a deal. Safety culture, accountability, lines of authority, peer pressure, and supervision appears over there as well, because a personal factor is I was maybe not getting the supervision that I should have had. My officer wasn't the eyes up safety guy, but maybe over on the social, cultural, economic side, on the other end of the spectrum, maybe there's a chief that doesn't appoint a safety officer, or maybe there's a safety officer in somebody's department that shows up and wants to be Division C instead of safety, which has been known to happen. Mm-hmm. So if you put all those things together, the story eventually will get told. One of the ones I investigated recently was a firefighter who was doing power squats, and he did them at 105 pounds, like 185 pounds, and he felt a little something, and he thought, oh, that's a little strange, you know. Well, then he did 250 pounds, and then he did 370 pounds, and then he got hurt. Well, we can back that up and figure out that when he felt a little something with the lesser weight, probably should have either not gone up in weight or not done any more reps. And there's a lot of that where people, it's kind of like you touch the electrical wire and get shocked. And I say this because I did it many years ago. And you wonder, what the heck was that? So you reach out and grab it again. And then you go, oh, that was electricity. I just got shocked. So we're finding that there are little warnings and tip-offs to people. What we're struggling with is trying to figure out, sometimes it's not always easy to find a root cause. An example, at 3 a.m., you go to a structure fire, you get out of bed, you're operating, working hard, and you're on that uneven ground in the backyard working, and you partially tear your Achilles tendon. What's the root cause of that? And you could be silly and say, well, it's these firefighters that are on the wrong side of 40 or the wrong side of 50 in some cases. Or is it because he was sleeping, not warmed up and stretched out? Or you see how far you can go.
Right.
But you have to be persistent, and you have to be looking for something that is actionable, even though you may not always find something actionable. You're looking for something I can decide to train. I can update or improve my policies. I can buy new equipment, and we recently had this come up, or I can stop buying that equipment because it's not good. We had somebody who had a piece of glass from an auto extrication go through their glove and embed in their finger. Well, we don't want those gloves anymore. So it takes you wherever it takes you, but it's kind of intriguing to see where it's going to take you. And the thing is, you'll show up for the interview thinking it's going to take me to those gloves. And guess what it takes you to? Somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. The worst thing we can do as an investigator is prejudge that we know the root cause. We just have to let it flow and let it come out to wherever it's going to lead us to, and to do our very best not to lead it to where we want it to turn out.
And it's more difficult than it sounds. And then for us, the implementation of this is we're still voting whether something was preventable or non-preventable. And hopefully in the future we'll stop doing that. It certainly doesn't hurt anything, but it's a mindset. Every accident could be prevented, really, if you think about it. And if you say the word accident on the National Fire Academy campus, they get all itchy because they don't like the word accident. They like to think that things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something that if you keep it in motion and keep trying to find out, and it's that old cascade of events, a bunch of things happen that result in an accident, how far back up that chain can I make a change that will change the outcome up in front? And it might be all the way back at training, or how you hire or promote, or things that you don't think are going to be factors will become factors. And that's what I'm excited about, is continuing this journey and seeing what factors emerge, what we can change, and how it affects the health and safety of our people, which is the ultimate goal. Come in healthy and excited, learn, work, spend time with your fire service family, go home and have fun and relax and enjoy your family at home.
Nice. A good goal. I think what I'd like to do is extend an invitation to you to, at some point in the future, for us to have the encore podcast interview after you've had some of this, actually, like the policies put into place, and see just how this whole thing looks in motion, and some of the successes that you've had as a result of these efforts. Because we know now it's still kind of early to draw the conclusion of how effective it has been. I think it holds great potential, but we're really on the very front end of this launch. It's kind of like looking like a rocket on the launch pad and saying, we've put a lot of effort into it, and there's some gases coming out of the engines and it's ready to go, but let's not beam any pictures down from orbit yet, because it's not quite in it's not out of the atmosphere yet. That's kind of how this is, right? It's just right on the ready to go full swing.
It is, and we're also imagine that rocket sitting there and it's shaking, and there's a little bit of fire coming out of the bottom, and then somebody comes up and says, wait a minute, we're going to change pilots. You two guys get out. We got two other guys that are going to get in. And that's what we're doing with our the change that's coming in our organization. We're changing pilots. And so hopefully the pilot that we're putting in is going to be interested in going on that journey, because if not, he probably shouldn't be at the controls, right?
Well, that's always the risk, is whenever there's a change like that, is will the new person be as inspired as the person who's stepping into a different role now? And you see it a lot in organizations when they get a new chief, and that new chief has their, I don't want to say agenda, because that might sound like not the right word, but they've got their own goals as to what they want to see accomplished, and they might not run consistent with the goals of their predecessor. So some of those predecessor programs and things kind of, even though a lot of people put a lot of effort into them, they don't get carried onward. And that's kind of, in part, what might be at risk here, is that this doesn't become part of the ambitious efforts in the future that it has been up to this point because of an organizational change.
That's correct. And we'll see. We can only focus on so many things. I think this is a pretty good focus. Health and safety is important. And I think we're giving that program to a chief who's very passionate about health and safety. And he runs the firefighter wellness side of things now. So I don't think it's a hard sell to get him interested in the other side of it.
Yeah.
So
good.
Looking forward to that.
Is there anything else that we need to cover that we have not yet?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
Okay. Oh, we've actually been at this almost an hour and a half, if you can imagine how every time I kind of glance at the clock, I'm like, no, it can't be an hour already. It can't be an hour and a half already. But it's amazing how the time, clicks off when you're having good conversations like this. But I want to thank you for the gift of your time, for joining me, sharing your passion. If somebody wanted to learn more than what was shared here, how could they find you?
They can find me at my work email address,
okay,
which is alex.ch ARONI at southkingfire.org.
Okay. And would you be okay if I put that in the show notes that will go along with the show?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. And then for the listeners and viewers, I don't want to put him on the spot right now as to what he would be willing to share as far as the matrix and documents and stuff, and the draft policies and things, because they just might be not yet where he can share them. But if he can, I will also link those in the show notes as well, so that somebody can maybe not have to reinvent the wheel and come up with these, all on their own, that they can take what you have and build on that. But he might not be able to do that just yet in their organization, and we'll respect that if that's the case as well. Alex, thank you again for being on the show and sharing your passion on this topic.
It's been my pleasure, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Alex.Charoni, for sharing your passion with my listeners and viewers. The Situational Awareness Show was launched in 2014 with a purpose: to give a platform to those who've had near-miss events to share their stories. When I'm on the road delivering classes on situational awareness, I often ask attendees about the near-miss events that they have had, and they have shared some amazing stories with me. Those stories motivated me to launch this podcast in the first place, so those lessons could be shared with a bigger audience. You. The Situational Awareness Matters show, podcasted as SAMatters Radio, and our companion video program on the SAMatters TV YouTube channel, along with other videos we've posted there, have enjoyed over 800,000 downloads. I'm so thankful for your support, and I feel so honored to be able to provide the platform for these amazing stories to be shared. If you like our show, please do me a solid favor. Favor. Please subscribe. For the audio version of the show, search SAMatters Radio on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or iHeartRadio. For the video version, subscribe to SAMatters TV on YouTube. If you find any value in the show, I'd really appreciate it if you would give the show a rating and write a review. Your ratings and reviews help others to find the show. And more importantly, your feedback inspires me to want to work harder for you. Since 2007, Situational Awareness Matters instructors have helped more than 1,300 organizations and have trained over 80,000 individuals to improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, public transportation operators, aviation workers, oil refinery process operators, and more. If you or someone you know works in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then we're here to help to improve your safety and your survival, and to help you accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home to the ones who love you. I'd like to take a moment to honor and thank the companies, organizations, agencies, and departments that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters training for their team members. The Odessa, Texas Fire Department, Louisiana Pacific Corporation, Southeast Texas Regional Advisory Council EMS Committee, the United States Air Force Academy, the North Metro Fire District, the Evans Fire District. If you're interested in where we're going to be upcoming, here's the schedule. On August 8th and 9th, we'll be at Fire Rescue International in Atlanta, Georgia. August 12th at the Itasca County 911 Center in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. August 14 through 16 at the Lansing Fire Department in Lansing, Michigan. August 17th at the Ingham County Fire Chiefs Association in Michigan. August 21 and 22 at the Coastal Bend Regional Advisory Council EMS Committee Seminars in Corpus Christi, Texas. August 27 through 29 at the Safety Plus Conference in New Orleans, Louisiana. If you want to see the locations of all the upcoming events, just head over to the SAMatters.com website, and the schedule is under the Training Programs tab on the top of the homepage. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab, and I'll give you a call. If you want to become part of the SAMatters community of learners, there's several ways that you can do that. Just check the show notes for how you can get connected with us by signing up for our monthly newsletter, by subscribing to the SAMatters radio podcast show, by subscribing to the SAMatters TV YouTube channel, and how to follow us on the social media channels of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we're sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 280 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you to my guest, Captain Alex.Charoni of the South King County Fire and Rescue Department. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, SimsUshare. Thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. And thank you to all the companies, agencies, organizations, and associations that have hosted Situational Awareness Matters training programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted the live stream training programs where I come to your organization live via the internet to train your members. Thank you to the more than 3,000 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The feedback I've received from the Online Academy graduates is just amazing and very humbling, and I thank you for that. But most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SAMatters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit SAMatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.